Security leaders are being pulled into directions like consolidate into one platform to simplify or run, best of breed across multiple vendors to stay resilient. But there is a third variable that changes the outcome, and it's independence. Who builds the program and who tests and validates it at the end. So welcome to Secure by Design. I'm Daniel Kulig, and I'm your host today. Today we're unpacking the pros and cons of multi-vendor IT and security versus consolidated platforms, and why independent validation matters so much, especially when you're trying to prove your program works in the real world, not just on piece of paper. So today, my guest is Eric Boemanns, a rare blend of technology executive that I call you, a lawyer operating at the intersection of security, privacy, governance, and execution. Eric has a perspective that's very practical, and you will see what I mean, but also very grounded in accountability. So, Eric, welcome. And for listeners meeting you for the first time, um, you know, first thought maybe, what's your current focus? What kinds of organizations do you most often help? And what experiences shaped how you think about these, the vendor directions?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Daniel. I appreciate the opportunity to come and share some thoughts here. And I think what's great is the focus. So, the last 2 years, I've been working with the small and mid-sized market, helping them build compliance programs, helping them build cybersecurity programs. And you run into the issues that we're going to be talking about really fast when you have a company who internally doesn't necessarily have the ability to understand this market, these products, all the things, all the choices that are here, and more so which ones they need, which ones they don't need, and then you add on to that, and then the budget, right? They don't have the budget to buy all of it, right? And so
Hmm.
they've got to make very critical decisions about their security products, about their compliance products. And so when you think about, that's been my focus of how to help them, how to guide them, how to build um, my own, best of breed suites and or partnerships with companies that provide the all-in-one suite. So like I'm playing both of those roles right now, helping my clients make these decisions. And so today's topic aligns well with the focus that I've had.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Yeah, yeah, I think we touched on a topic that gets very emotional. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, because it touches budgets, risks, and
Yep.
ego. Most of the time, right? So I'm very happy that we are you know we'll be trying to unpack it today. So yeah. And also, what I've noticed is to your opening statement, like talking about leaders, they often treat the vendor choices like um how should I put this, like procurement decisions, you
Sure.
know but in fact, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but they are like actually architecture decisions, more or less, right? So
Yeah, exactly. And I think, if we're talking about the security products, those don't exist in a vacuum, in a procurement vacuum, right? Like I can't just go buy the best padlock for the front door, right? Because it's a technology that has to work with all the things I already have today. So I've got existing ERP systems, I've got existing collaboration, I've got some kind of office suite like Microsoft or Google. So if I'm trying to make a compliance decision, if I'm trying to make a security decision, I have to be thinking about how it architects, how it fits in, and how it plays well with what I already have. It's not, yeah, you can't just go say, go procure the best email product. Well, one, that doesn't mean anything. And two, it might not work with what you're using for email.
Exactly. Exactly. Indeed. Um, yep. So that leads us to another exciting part of this podcast. Um, and I wonder, like, for example, when people say vendor sprawl or
Yeah,
platform consolidation, you know, in your opinion, in your simple like language, can you explain what are they actually describing?
absolutely. And so I kind of want to start with a few years ago, I was on a CISO roundtable, and vendor sprawl was actually the topic. And
Oh,
at that time, the statistic that they shared was most major organizations have 70, 80, maybe 100 different security vendors. And you're
mm,
sitting there and you're like, what is that? How's that possible? And so here I am. I'm at a smaller company. We got 1,500 employees, and I start counting. I'm like, well, I have email security, and I have identity, and I have training. I got to like 20, just going through what you might categorize as a security vendor at a small organization. So then you magnify that up to a Fortune 50, Fortune 500. It's not crazy to think that they have 80 to 100 different vendors. And so I think
mm,
when we think about that vendor sprawl, that is the definition. Is there's not 80 different problems at an organization that we're trying to solve, but yet we have 80 different vendors there to solve that solution or to provide that solution. And I think that is where you kind of hit that why. Why do we have so many companies doing what maybe is 10 different problems, 8 different ways? And so some of that is like we talked about earlier. You've got different platforms you've got to protect. And sometimes it is literally just the sprawl. Every budget year, you're like, well, maybe I add a new tool to the toolbox and see what it does.
mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it did. I think this gets kind of messy because I think people just tend to mix tools,
Yeah,
like the managed services and testing providers in one basket in one sentence. You know what I mean?
right.
So that I see as an issue here.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
yeah.
I,
So
I I was going to say you brought up MSPs. That's even one of those multipliers too, right? Is if you have partners that are also working with your data, they have their own
yeah.
suite. So your as a company, your data may be being protected by not just 100 different security products, but by 500 because of all the different partners that you have in your ecosystem and everything they're using too.
Mm,
So your sprawl just multiplies at that point.
yeah, exactly. And maybe you've seen it too, but like from what I have seen so far, like in my professional experience, is like the moment vocabulary is unclear, the decision becomes very political, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You know, and this really is not helping organizations. Um,
Right.
yeah. So yeah, that's pretty awesome. Your comment on that was really really spot on. Um, okay, just to continue on this topic. So you know, what would you say typically like triggers the typical conversation inside a company? Is it a cost pressure, incidents, maybe audits, or just typical fatigue? I mean, what is it in
Right.
your experience?
I mean, I think it is all of the above,
Ah,
and it
okay,
depends
that's what I thought.
on the company and what. So, and I'll even go one step, add one to that. It could be, you know, the CISO or somebody on their team went to a conference and saw another vendor, and that vendor said, you know what, we do 20 different things that you probably are using 20 different companies. So sometimes it's that fifth category of, wait, there's another tool, but maybe this one will finally simplify my internal environment. Because going back to those points you made, if I had an incident and I was not able to identify and respond to that incident effectively because that incident crossed three different tools and those tools
Mhm.
don't talk to each other, right? Then
Yep.
internally we're running slower, we're running less efficient. But then on top of that, the tools themselves may not be configured. So you may actually realize that you've got 80 different products, but you're only using 20% of all of them. And so there's another type of cost inefficiency. And so I think something triggers that event, whether it's the audit and
Yes.
you're asked to go gather evidence. And it's like, why did this take us 3 weeks to gather evidence for this one thing? Well, because we had 30 different systems to pull it out of. Or budget. Yeah. A lot of
Yeah,
companies
Dan.
over the last years have had to reduce cybersecurity budgets. And so that's a great time to be looking at that sprawl and say, can we contract that at all?
Totally agree with that because from what I have seen, it's like the trigger really matters because it kind of biases the decision from day one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, that's the consequences. It's triggering the consequences at the end. Um,
Yeah.
and also, uh, you mentioned audit. So when the trigger is an audit, um, I from what I can recall, like teams sometimes optimize for passing instead of
Yes.
for resilience, right?
Right.
So it's like a never ending game, I would say. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So
And that might be one of those cases where you actually have yet another vendor that focuses on the audit, and it may actually be disconnected from the systems that are actually protecting you, right? So you have the system over here, it's doing its thing so that, to your point, it's designed to the audit. Meanwhile, the incident that you're actually trying to defend against is over here and invisible to that tool because it's in 12 other tools that you're monitoring. That. So yeah, that audit, that idea of we should build to the audit may end up adding more sprawl and less
uh,
efficiency to the whole system.
yes, yes, exactly. All right, so now let's talk about multi-vendor. Maybe
Mhm.
let's magnify the resilience and complexity a bit more.
Yeah,
Maybe from your perspective, again, and in your opinion, what is the strongest case for using multiple vendors in security and IT? Like, if you could share some, you know, light on this.
of course. Yeah, and I think it comes back to we had the opening phrase, best of breed, and if we know
Uh,
anything about any products in the world, no company is great at all the things they do. Right? Some companies produce lots of products, but one product is their best product. And security products are the same. We have companies that are great at detecting phishing. We have companies that are great at training. We have companies that have, and then we have all the companies that offer some flavor of that. And so you can very quickly run into a thing where, like, well, to save money, we're going to consolidate on the vendor because they do these other things, but then they don't do them as well. And so we end up with the situation where we're not really saving money. It feels like we are because we're spending less, but in truth, we are getting less and a less effective program. And so that multi-vendor really does allow us to make sure that we are protecting the core things with the company that does it best. Like
Mhm.
we talk about defense in depth as well. That's the another aspect is sometimes sometimes you really can't protect something with a single point of defense, right? That overlapping defense of we're looking at this way, and this product is looking at it from a slightly different, and this one has a new AI model that maybe is going to be better, but we don't know yet. And so layering these different products can actually create um, basically multiple chip hazards, right? Multiple chip wires for an attack that, okay, yes, they got past vendor A and they got past vendor B, but good news, we had vendor C also watching the same thing from a slightly different way, and that caught them. And so, had we just relied on that single platform,
Mm.
the breach would have happened undetected. And here we are, like the board, the customers, the C suites, the regulatory bodies are all saying, "Why'd you miss this? Right? Like, why didn't you have product C in place?"
exactly. And I also think, like the best version of multi-vendor is, um, how should I put this? Um, Intentional. It's actually structured, it's design.
Yes.
There's nothing to do, it has nothing to do with, like, accidental. It's not accidental pretty much. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And, even like, in my, experience, I think I have been always been cautious about, like, single points of failure. So, like,
Yeah.
on the other end, like, diversification can be a real risk strategy, you could say, uh, to that point as well. Yeah, so
Yeah.
really reminds me of, like, an I think I said, of investing logic. So it's like concentration can outperform, but at the same time, it increases dependency risk. You know, so
Yeah.
they're all like, you know um, kind of dependent on each other at the end. I would say
Yeah. For
this
sure.
is this is what I kind of see, um, you know, in my experiences. Okay, so, Eric, but now let's talk about, like, um, the instances where multi-vendor approaches actually break down, in a real life, or real environment, work environment. So where do you see that happening?
Yeah. And that is unfortunately too common the reality, right? We just talked about all these great reasons to have a couple different vendors protecting the different things, the layers, all those sort of approaches. But one, having multiple vendors we've talked about is more expensive, right? Because we now have to integrate multiple things with the same data sources. We have to have people with experience with all these different products, right? And it's hard to find senior engineers who have experience with 10 different products. They tend to go deep and do something well as opposed to spread out. Um, and then we have the risk of basically silos of information. We talked about that a little bit too, right? If
Mhm.
when there's a breach, the person who is attacking is not constrained to the products we're using to detect them, right? They are allowed to go to whatever system is most convenient, the easiest path in, and that almost certainly is going to cross the boundaries of multiple security products. And so, if they aren't integrated with each other, if they aren't integrated with something that can see through the different silos, then activity could be happening, in a different spot of our system that we don't have enough eyes on, we don't pay enough attention to because we're focused over here on these other products. And so, going back to the maybe we don't have the experience with the product, maybe we don't have it configured correctly. Like we hooked it up, it's monitoring, but nobody set up the dashboards or the alerting. So there's the little red light blinking, but nobody knows to look at it. And so we end up with a lot of we're baking in new risks to our approach because we're adding this complexity, because we're adding that. And then on top of that, cost, right? You have
Yeah,
the additional cost because that extra module for your existing vendor is going to be typically a fraction of the cost of buying that entire module from a net new company. And so, yeah, you end up with just cost expenses, which again, sometimes is worth it because you need better capabilities, but only if your team can use those capabilities, configure them correctly, integrate them correctly, and monitor them correctly.
yeah. I mean, I see, again, many, risks and costs associated with this. I call it like hidden tax, even.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, integration, ownership, and operational drag. I mean, so, so, eh, you would argue that, the biggest risk isn't actually to have too many tools. It's too little clarity on,
Yeah,
who actually owns the outcomes. This is probably the risk, you know.
right.
Um, yeah. So,
And to kind of carry that thought, right? The risk is so we have to defend against outside attack, right? That's why all these programs exist. That's why these products exist. But when we allow ourselves to sprawl in a
Yep.
non-strategic way, a non-tactical way, that is a negative outcome that's self-inflicted at that point, right? The hackers didn't have to take our money from us. We willingly gave it to
Yeah.
these vendors who aren't actually helping us in the end. So yeah, that's the other side of that is why we it doesn't make sense to spend money to protect yourself from something when the act of spending the money is worse than what you're protecting yourself from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, let's talk about consolidation, and how we simplify
Yeah,
and concentrate risk. Um, so, Eric, another question for you. In your experience, what's the strongest case for the consolidation? When does it genuinely improve security outcomes? In real environment.
absolutely. And I have to make a comment that so maybe 4 years ago, the biggest buzzword at security companies was single pane of glass, right? If you were a security company in 2022 and you were presenting your marketing, you had to say single pane of glass, right? It didn't matter what your product did, you just had to say those words. And so, if we're talking about that unified visibility, that dashboard, that single pane of glass, the reason they had to say it is because it really did address a lot of the problems that we've been talking about. So, if an attack is coming in and it starts with a phishing email, and then they download a product to the laptop, and that product then can access servers, we've just crossed three different security boundaries, if you will, right? From um,
Mhm.
email to endpoint to server. And if I have three different, going back to what I've said before, that was probably three different silos, three different reports. This unified dashboard concept, this single pane of glass, should, if it's working correctly, configured correctly, show me that as a single incident that I can then trace as it moves across the different systems and the different boundaries, which means I'm going to actually recognize it as a real problem much faster. We tend to ignore things that happen in isolation that don't correlate to anything else. Not necessarily always, but if it's a blip on the radar, we're like, well, look for more. But if you can't correlate that to another blip on a different radar and another blip on a different radar, you're just going to see noise. And you're going to maybe tune that out. Whereas this unified a platform that's consolidated, a platform that has its different protection layers working well together and can present
Mhm.
them in a unified way, you're going to say, oh, wait, that's not noise. That's a thing that I can actually watch and trace and see as it moves through my systems. We need to respond.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm very sympathetic to consolidation when the teams are stretched thin.
Right.
This
Yeah.
is like
Well,
the bottom line for me. You know, um, um,
yeah.
and
And to that point, in it might have been three different people that were paying attention to those three systems, right? So
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think simplification can be a forced multiplier. Um,
yeah,
so if it like for example increases consistency, uh, it could also respond to the speed of it, right? So,
yeah.
yep. All right. So, this is very valuable. What we just touched on, and to continue, what are the risk of the consolidation that the leaders underestimate, in your opinion, Eric?
I think we've kind of touched a few of them.
Hmm.
We may not be getting as strong a solution in certain parts of our program. I think that can be underestimated because the competing pressure of budget, all the things that we've been talking about, I think are going to tip the scales, especially going forward toward, well, if this vendor does 80% of the one we're using today, then we should consolidate, right? Because we're going to save more than that 20%. And if we keep repeating that and keep chipping away at our program, did we, yes, we saved money, but have we made it significantly less effective because we kept making that decision in isolation? We kept saying,
Hmm.
yeah, we can use their built-in security awareness training. We can drop the dedicated vendor. We can use their built-in email phishing. We can drop the dedicated vendor. And now, because each of those decisions was made whenever that contract came up for renewal, right?
Hmm.
They were made independent of a broader perspective of what is our program trying to achieve? What are the best products and the best investment of our money into those products to achieve those goals? We're not doing that holistically. We're doing that, you know, every time a contract comes up for renewal and saying, well, we've already got that with this product. So let's just cancel and consolidate. And again, it's a every time it's a reasonable decision, but collectively we may be eroding our defenses in a way that we're not realizing.
Yeah, yeah, there is something very true about this, and the way I kind of understand this, like um, the the consolidation itself, like traits, the complexity
Yeah.
for, I would say, dependency. So
Yes.
sometimes that's that's smart, super smart. Sometimes it's just not opposite angle. It's very dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. You definitely have a more risk of vendor lock-in at that point, right? Like we're all
Yeah.
in with this vendor. Now we can't leave because there's nobody else on the market that does all those things as well as they do. So if we want to leave them, we got to go
Mhm.
find 12 different companies, and that's
Yeah, and
procurement will never let us.
exactly. And would you say, like, for example, yeah, you touched on very important aspect also, like the lock-in. So lock-in is not just you know pricing issue, right? Correct me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong, but it's more it's more of a like a strategic flexibility issue. Would you agree with that, or?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. You know, we have kind of, joined forces with this company
Uh-huh.
strategically. We've invested in them. We've built projects. We've done training. We've taken their world and brought it, made it part of ours, right? And now we have to think like that vendor. We have to, and to undo that, it's not simply just canceling a contract and installing a new piece of software. It's changing.
Mhm.
It's a transformation project to switch off that vendor across multiple disciplines within our organization. So yeah, I think we we to gain the best benefit from that consolidated platform cannot be as flexible because we're not at that point, we're probably not leveraging the platform as effectively if if we're keeping our options open.
Yep. Great. Great. Now let's see who builds versus who validates. So, Eric, why is independence so important in security, especially for building and testing programs?
Yeah. And I think it begins even with just basic as a human, right? When we build something, we almost never see the mistakes in it, right? If you can't proofread your own writing, you can't debug your own code, you can't critique your own pitch if you're a founder, right? Whatever it is we're producing, we know the answers that we forgot to say out loud. We know what we meant to say, and so we have an inherent bias toward our own work. And so if you just start at that level, that by itself is a reason why you should not test your own security program, right? Because,
Mhm.
well, I thought of 5 different things. 5 that must be all the things I need to think about. So I'm going to test 5 different things. Well, the adversary is going to come up with the 6th thing that I didn't put in that, right? And so if you're testing yourself, you probably are going to pass, right? Like that's just
I
the
love it.
nature of it. Yeah. And there's no ill will there. There's no kind of malfeasance, if you will, at that level. Then we add that risk, right? If you hire me to build your program, you've given me money to build an effective program, and then you hire me to test that. Well, if I'm not, a fully honest person, why would I fail my own work? Right? Like it's not in my interest, my self-interest, to say, yeah, that thing I built you is not going to work. You're going to have to build it again. Like, why would I open myself up to that risk? So that's one why I don't build and test, right? For that very reason, right? I whether or not you should not be worried about whether or not your vendor is an honest person when they do their work. You should go ahead and give them the opportunity to separate it out. Say, you're going to build it, they're going to test it, and that way we don't have to worry about if you're honest or not. We want you to be honest. We believe you're honest, but we don't even want to give you the incentive to be dishonest about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you took the words out of my mouth, because I was thinking the same thing. If you grade your own exam, you will
Yeah,
eventually believe your own story, right? So to
yeah,
speak. So I mean, this is exactly it. Yeah, I mean, to me, independence feels like pretty much an overhead. But
yeah.
until the day it saves you,
Right.
So
Exactly. Yeah,
yeah, so that's the critical point. And I think also, like, maybe to add here, like, the credibility, I see it's very underrated, asset, most of the case. Like, credibility with, the whole leadership team,
yeah,
even like customers, or your external auditors. It's definitely, underrated. That's
yeah.
that's what I see also.
Yeah. I mean, you're exactly right. If I'm willing to build a program and say, please have somebody else test it, have somebody else check my work,
Yeah.
that shows confidence, one, in what I've done. It shows credibility, two. And it shows also willingness to make sure that we have the best thing possible, right? If I have gaps in what I've built, I also want to know, and I want you to know so that we fix them. And so I think you're exactly right. You're showing confidence and credibility by saying, I've built it. Now let's get somebody else to test it. And so,
Yes.
because yes,
Eh,
if I say I built it and I tested it, I'm going to doubt the credibility there.
Most definitely. All right. So, going that path again. So, where do organizations unintentionally compromise independence then?
Yeah, I think it can happen in a lot of different ways. I think,
Okay.
and it depends on if they're working with a third party. A lot of the third parties who are like on the audit side, it's baked into their program, right? They have, if, like I'm
Mm,
a lawyer, and lawyers have a lot of rules baked into our profession. CPAs
correct.
have a similar set of rules. So those tend to be less of a problem just because the profession should be self-enforcing its own independence. Um, and of course, there's gaps in every human enterprise. But in theory, that's a little bit stronger. It's when we're doing that internally, and there's not necessarily you can't be professionally punished by an organization. You can be fired by your company, but you're not
Hmm.
going to lose your license to be a firewall engineer, or CISO. You're going to, and so I think that's where it becomes. You just mentioned it. It's an overhead to have that external test, that independent test, and so if I'm trying to build a program and save money, and I have no requirement to have an independent third party audit, it's going to be hard to convince leadership to say, let's add 20% to that budget that we just asked for so that we can then test that we did the right job. Because in a way, you're saying, maybe I'm not good enough to do it the first time,
Hmm.
right? And so to say, then let's test it, like maybe just, and we see this on the software dev side all the time, right? Like, I don't need to hire QA. I just need my developers to produce fewer bugs.
Mm,
Yeah, that's not realistic, but it's
no,
repeated often. And we see the same thing in
very
security. It's like, just configure the firewall correctly the first time, and then we don't need to test it.
correct. Correct. I mean, you know, it totally, seems like, the convenience. Is that very slippery slope, if I can use that term. Like, meaning, like, one partner does everything because it's easy,
Yeah.
right? And that could be a trap. So, you know, and also, for, like, I think something came to my head, in regards to this. like about small companies, like small companies assume um, the independence is only for big guys, big
Right.
enterprises. But I don't think it's true. Um, if you can design it, in a simple way, it's for everybody, right?
Yeah. And you I think you can. I think you can say, here's the complete solution. And that complete
Yeah.
solution not only includes the build, it includes the test. And here's how we're going to test it in a way that provides independence, right? Like you can basically have a complete paragraph instead of an incomplete one when you describe the security program. And that complete paragraph includes how we're testing it independently. So it should not be an afterthought. It should be
Yeah.
part of your original story.
Exactly, exactly. So now, execution, which is very important. How do you preserve independence without actually slowing, the execution element?
Yeah. Well, that as Quinn mentioned, that is the other inefficiency, right? Is it is
Oh,
harder for programs to move fast if
mm,
they have to stop and get tested, right? And so if you're doing an annual audit, it doesn't matter. It's annual. Security, as we know, is not an annual once a year problem. It's a continuous 24/7, 365 a day year problem. And so we have to be able to continue to we have to build the systems in a way that, to your point, we can test them continuously, right? So um, whether
mhm,
that's continuous pen testing as a very specific solution, or something more generic. If we can't be tested um, intentionally, the reality is we're being tested unintentionally by the outside forces anyway. And so it,
mm,
it we have to the program has to stay agile. The program has to stay ready to adapt to what's happening in the world. And as a result, so does the testing. So does we have to be able to have that a partner, a program, product, pick your P word, right? That's lockstep with us as we're defending to test it.
mhm.
And again,
Yeah,
because if not, the adversaries are testing it. So we always have continuous testing. It's just um, whether it's friendly or not.
yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, I think you know, the leadership. I mean, it's an very intricate, very like significant topic for them. I mean, it's like I would say maybe maturity topic.
Yeah,
Because why? Because again, the independence that we talked about requires a lot of discipline, and it's a human factor as well, not just the budget itself. You know,
yeah, right.
I mean,
We're changing
budget is one
behaviors.
thing. Yeah, yeah. I mean, budget is one thing, but if you don't have the internal discipline, then your independence will be at risk. You know,
Yeah,
so that's definitely it. Um. Okay, let's talk about some practical things here. Maybe to give some examples. So, Eric, if you had to give a simple decision framework, what criteria decide multi-vendor versus consolidation?
yeah. I mean, I think the simplest way, which is in
Mhm.
reality not that simple to do,
There's
the
not such a
simplest
thing
way,
as simple,
right?
right?
Easy to say, hard to do,
Is it? Yep.
uh, is what is the cost benefit, right? And so let's say you
Mm,
have a product and that product covers 90% of your security and it costs $100,000 a year. And the risk of not doing it is clearly more than 100,000, right? Cool.
yep.
We've kind of got an idea that maybe we should use that consolidated platform because it gets us mostly there and the cost of it is way less than the risk of not doing it.
Right.
Versus, let's get to 100% coverage. Fictional, but pretend that we have 100% coverage. We have 20 different vendors, and now we're spending $20 million a year. Again, exaggerating from my previous example, but we're only a $5 million company. The math doesn't work, right? And so, again, I'm being
No.
extreme for the sake of simplifying it. But if you if you can't see that what you're going to invest is less than what you're going to lose, then you don't have a
Mhm.
good return on investment, if you will, right? Your
Right.
reduction of risk is not corresponding to the investment in that reduction. And then so I think again, the consolidated platforms probably win more often than not at a small company because they get you really close and typically for a lower dollar, which is going to be more proportional to the risk that you're facing versus building a complicated system. You may not even be able to measure the return on that because there's so many different platforms and your team doesn't understand half of them. So you're relying on third parties, which are more expensive. And so all the things that come back into that, you do probably tend in the small business side toward that consolidated platform just because the simple math problem, cost to risk, it works out in their favor.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, from my own experience, I mean, I work closely with different, small, medium enterprises, startups, and this actually, reminds me of like, teams skipping the, exit strategy. Just a conversation about the exit strategy. It's gonna be there somewhere in the future,
Yeah,
and
right.
then end up, regretting it, so there's no plan for it, so it's like um yeah, very similar situation. So now I have this question for you, very specific. What does a smart 90-day plan look like to reduce tool chaos without creating a blind spot or blind spots? If
Yeah,
you could. Hmm.
absolutely. So I think first off, you have to have a great inventory of what you have, right? And going back to my original story about the round table and
Hmm.
when I heard 80 tools and I'm like, well, how many do I have? And I started counting what are the products that are in your thing? Because if you have Google or Microsoft, you've got a security product baked in that you may have forgotten to count. So again, have a good inventory of what you have, what their capabilities are, or at least what they're supposed to be doing for you. And then I think to you got the inventory now, and sorry, include in that inventory the cost, right? What are you paying for each
Hmm.
of those so that you get that
Right.
upfront?
Yep.
Then where are what are they supposed to be doing for you? What horizontal or vertical slice of the puzzle are they providing a solution to? And then that gives you the opportunity at that point to look for those overlaps, right? Do we have three different things looking at the same problem, or is what we're buying from Microsoft or Google already doing something that we have an add-on product now, and that we maybe can look at reducing? So again, trying to structure that right. Where are you today? What do you have? What are you paying? What are they capable of doing? What can they be adding? What are they doing for you, whether it's effective or not, right? And then from there, what is it that you're actually trying to protect? What are the crown jewels of the system? What are the threats that you as a business are facing, right? If you're
Right.
manufacturing, you've got different threats than if you're a SaaS product. And so making sure that your threat model, your capability model of the products that you're trying are actually aligned. And then where do you have those overlapping things that perhaps are redundant? Now we can start to see who can we peel away and see if we're keeping the same level of effectiveness at a lower cost and complexity.
Right. This absolutely, absolutely. And I really like the 90 days. Just because I mean, in simple terms, it forces clarity.
Yeah,
And clarity in terms of like, for example, inventory, maybe your ownership, obviously the outcomes, and
yeah,
there's no excuses.
right,
uh, so uh, and connecting the dots with the independence. So
yeah,
if the independence matters, I would expect at least one validation checkpoint, um,
yeah,
that be built into this 90-day plan. You know that
yeah.
would correlate. You know, nicely.
Well, and I think it's almost like in software we have regression testing where we push out a new feature, and then we run the same test we ran before we pushed out the feature, and it should still pass. You have the same approach here, right? What are we doing today to test our program? If we peel back a layer and now we have one less vendor, does that same test pass? Or, oh no, we don't catch that particular issue. Okay, well, that vendor was definitely doing something different that we might still need. So yeah, retest,
Exactly.
test, and retest.
Test and retest. Do it all over again.
Yeah,
Um, all right. So I would say, Eric, this has been a practical conversation. I really appreciate that. And I just want to say, maybe what the takeaways are, for our listeners, and what I have kind of like summarized in my head. So the multi-vendor, can increase resilience, obviously, um, but only when ownership and integration are kind of real. So that would
yeah,
be one takeaway. And consolidation can improve execution, but it introduces the lock-ins that we talked about, and concentration risk that must be managed purposely or intentionally.
yeah,
So that also good. And on the independence, that matters. So separating, the building from validating is what protects the credibility, and I would say reduces mm, the blind spots. So that is kind of the essence of what we have talked today with you, Eric. But I would like, maybe mm, give listeners one action they can take this week to improve their vendor strategy and strengthen independent validation. What would you think that that one action that they can take today would be? Right away, without
yeah.
putting too much time into it. As a leadership
Yeah.
team.
I mean, I think I'm going to go back to that 90-day plan, that step one. What do you have today? Go build that inventory, right? What do you have?
Yeah.
What are you spending? Because if you don't have that this week, that's also a problem, right? So make sure you have that inventory, because that's going to give you a clear picture on, well, where you are today and what you need to be thinking about. So I know it's repetitive to say it again, but that really is, I think, actionable, easy, and necessary.
This is a wonderful summary, and I really appreciate your thoughts here, your insights, and sharing the insights with the listeners, with us here on this podcast today. I really want to say thank you for joining us. We really appreciate the episode, and to everyone listening, thank you for spending time with us. Of course, please continue to watch and follow us as Secure by Design podcast. And reminder, if you're not a subscriber yet, you still have times to subscribe now. And if the episode was any useful, share it with a founder, with an operator or security leader who is dealing with the vendor sprawl or consolidation decisions. So thank you again, Eric.
Thank
Until
you.
next time, I'm Daniel Kulig. Thank you so much, and see you soon.